Welcome to New English Stories Book. Ready to level up your English? Here we learn through stories. Slow, clear, and fun. Listen, relax, and enjoy the journey. 1. Introduction. This story is about two very big countries. One is the United States, or the U.S., the other is China. These two countries have the largest economies in the world. They buy and sell many things from each other. This is called trade. For a long time, trade between the US and China grew bigger and bigger. But things started to change. The way the US and China traded began to have problems. The government of the US decided it wanted different rules for trade. The US president at the time, Donald Trump, wanted a new plan. His plan was called America First. This meant he wanted to help businesses and jobs inside the U.S. One way the U.S. government tried to do this was by using tariffs. Tariffs are special taxes. Countries put tariffs on goods that come from other countries. When a country puts a tariff on a product, that product becomes more expensive to buy. The U.S. government started putting new tariffs on many goods that came from China. They hoped this would make American people buy more things made in America. They also wanted China to change some of its own trade rules, but China did not agree with these new taxes. The Chinese government felt the tariffs were unfair. So, China answered back. It put its own new tariffs on goods that came from the U.S. When one country puts tariffs and the other country answers with tariffs, this is called retaliation. It is like they are fighting back using taxes. This disagreement about trade and taxes grew bigger over time. Both countries added more tariffs. Sometimes people called this situation a trade war. A trade war can make things difficult for businesses. It can also change the prices of things people buy every day. This book will tell you more about this trade discussion between the US and China. We will look at how it started. We will see how the tariffs got higher. We will learn about the important goods that were part of this trade fight, like metals and computer parts. We will also talk about why the U.S. government said these actions were needed to keep the country safe. Finally, we will think about how this trade problem affects people and businesses in both countries and around the world. We will explore what might happen next in the trade relationship between these two important nations. 2. New rules for trade. The way the United States traded with other countries started to change. The U.S. president at the time, Donald Trump, had a new idea. His idea was called America First. This meant that America's needs should come before other countries' needs, especially in business and trade. The goal was to help American companies sell more things and create more jobs inside the United States. The government wanted to make the American economy stronger. To do this, the U.S. government decided to change the rules of trade. One big change was adding new taxes on goods coming into the country. These special taxes are called tariffs. When companies in other countries sent their products to the U.S., they now had to pay this extra money. The plan was that this would make foreign goods more expensive. Then people in the U.S. might buy more things made in America instead. The U.S. first put a new tax of 10% on many goods coming from all countries. The U.S. government said the old trade rules were not fair. They believed other countries had rules that made it hard for American companies to sell their products there. President Trump wanted new trade deals that were better for America. He said that the U.S. had been treated unfairly in trade for many years, especially by China. He felt those days needed to end. So the U.S. started talking to many countries about making new trade agreements. More than 75 countries began discussions with the U.S. While these talks were happening, the U.S. government decided to wait before putting even higher taxes on goods from most of these countries. They paused the extra tariffs for countries that agreed to talk about new rules. However, the situation with China was different. The U.S. government did not pause the new taxes for China. This was because China did not just agree to talk. China answered back by putting its own new taxes on American goods. The U.S. government had warned countries not to do this. Because China did answer back with its own taxes, it faced different treatment under the new American trade rules. This was the beginning of a bigger trade disagreement between the two large countries. 3. China answers back. The United States started putting new taxes on goods coming from China. These special taxes are called tariffs. The leaders in China watched what the U.S. was doing. They were not happy about these new tariffs. They felt the taxes were unfair to Chinese businesses and people. China had to decide how to react. China chose to answer back strongly. They did not agree with the U.S. actions, so the Chinese government announced its own new taxes. These taxes were put on goods coming from the United States into China. This action, putting taxes on U.S. goods because the U.S. put taxes on Chinese goods first, is called retaliation. It means hitting back. China showed it would not just accept the American tariffs. This retaliation made the trade problems bigger. The situation became like a back-and-forth game. For example, the U.S. increased its tariffs on Chinese products to 145%. China answered quickly. It raised its tariffs on American products to 125%. This is sometimes called a tit-for-tat move. It means each side does something similar in return. The taxes were getting higher and higher. The Chinese government explained its actions. A spokesperson said that the United States started this tariff war. China said its own tariffs were necessary. They were needed to protect China's rights and businesses. The spokesperson added that nobody wins in a trade war. China did not want to fight using taxes, but it was prepared to defend itself. They felt their retaliation was a reasonable and fair answer. The United States government saw China's retaliation. Because China answered back with tariffs, the U.S. said its own taxes on Chinese goods could go even higher. The U.S. mentioned a possible future tariff of up to 245% on Chinese imports. This was a very high number. It showed that the disagreement between the world's two largest economies was growing much more serious. While the U.S. paused new taxes for some other countries during talks, it did not do this for China because China had retaliated. This was the start of more serious trade trouble. Both countries were now using tariffs against each other. This period of answering back with higher taxes showed that a trade conflict was beginning. The relationship between the U.S. and China was changing. 4. Taxes get higher. After China put taxes on American goods, the United States government decided to act again. The situation between the two big countries became more serious. The U.S. announced that taxes on goods coming from China could become much higher. They talked about a possible new tax rate. This rate was very high, up to 245%. The U.S. government explained why they were thinking about this big tax. They said it was because China answered back with its own taxes. Remember, China had put new taxes on U.S. goods after the U.S. first started adding taxes. The U.S. saw China's action as retaliation, meaning China was fighting back. This response made the U.S. decide that even higher taxes might be needed for Chinese products coming into America. This plan was part of the U.S. president's idea to put America first in trade. The government said that many other countries, more than 75 of them, were talking with the U.S. about new trade agreements. Because these countries were talking, the U.S. decided to wait before putting higher taxes on their goods. The extra taxes were paused for them, but the U.S. said China was different. China did not just talk, it put on its own new taxes. So the pause on higher taxes did not apply to China. China did not agree with the very high tax rate the U.S. mentioned. A person speaking for the Chinese government said that people should ask the U.S. side about the exact tax number. They repeated that China believed the U.S. started the trade problems with its first taxes. China felt its own taxes were needed to protect its country and its businesses. They said these actions were fair and right. China also stated that nobody wins in a trade war. They said China did not want to fight a trade war, but it was not afraid to fight if it had to. The back and forth actions meant that taxes between the U.S. and China were climbing higher and higher, making trade more difficult. 5 important goods in the fight. This trade argument between the U.S. and China is not just about money or taxes. It is also about specific things that countries make and sell. These things are called goods. Some goods are very important in this trade fight. Metals are often part of trade talks. For example, steel and aluminum are metals used to build many things. Countries sometimes put taxes on these metals when they buy them from other countries. But in the U.S.-China trade discussion, other materials are also very important. China makes some special materials that many countries need. These are not like everyday goods. They are materials used to make technology work. Some examples are gallium and germanium. Another one is antimony. China is a big seller of these materials. China also sells special metals called rare earth metals. These are used in many modern machines. Things like phones and computers need them. China also makes special magnets using these rare earth metals. These magnets are very strong. Recently, China decided to stop selling some of these important materials. It stopped exports of gallium and germanium to the United States for some time. China also stopped selling some types of rare earth metals and rare earth magnets. This action worried many businesses and governments around the world. Why are these materials so important? They are needed for high-tech products. Companies that make computer parts called semiconductors need them. The whole system for making electronics uses these materials. Without them, it is hard to make new phones, computers, and other electronic items. These materials are also needed for making cars and airplanes. Car companies and airplane companies use these special metals and magnets. They help make cars and planes work better. Also, these materials are very important for a country's safety. They are used to make things for the military. These are called military applications. The companies that make equipment for the army need these materials from China. This makes countries think about their national security. They worry about needing important things from another country, especially during a trade fight. So, these special goods, gallium, germanium, rare earth metals, and others, are a big part of the trade problem. China's control over selling them makes the situation more difficult. The U.S. is thinking hard about how to get these materials without problems in the future. This argument shows that trade is not just about buying and selling, but also about important resources for technology and safety. 6. Keeping America safe. The American government started to think more about safety. They looked very closely at where important materials came from. These materials are things like metals and minerals. They are needed to make many products people use every day. This careful look was because of worries about national security. National security means keeping the whole country safe. The government felt that needing important materials from other countries could be a risk to America's safety. The biggest worry was about getting materials from China. As trade problems grew, China stopped sending some special materials to the United States. These included metals like gallium and germanium. China also stopped sending some types of rare earth materials. These rare earths are used to make strong magnets. The U.S. government became concerned about this. Why were these materials so important? Many American companies need them. Car makers use them in electric cars. Airplane builders use them in jets. Companies that make computer parts like semiconductors need them too. Also, the American Army and Navy need these materials for their equipment. Without a sure supply, it could be hard for these companies and the military to do their work. This could affect jobs and the country's defense. So, the government started a special investigation. This investigation looked at all the important minerals the U.S. bought from other places. It tried to find out if it was risky to depend on other countries for these items. The government wanted to know exactly where these critical minerals came from. The answer for the government was to make more things inside the United States. This fit with the America First idea. The plan was to build more factories in America. These factories could produce the goods and maybe even the materials the country needed. The president said that America should not be held hostage by other countries. Being held hostage means another country could stop sending needed materials. This could hurt America. The U.S. wanted to avoid this situation. The investigation also looked at the whole system for making electronics. This included computer chips, which are very important today. The goal was clear. The U.S. wanted to control its own supply chain. A supply chain is the path goods take from where they are made to where they are used. The government wanted this path to be safe and reliable, especially for things needed for national security. Relying less on other nations, especially China, became a key goal. 7. How it affects the world. The trade problems are not just between the US and China. The US government is also talking to many other countries about trade. More than 75 countries wanted to discuss new trade deals with the US. While these talks are happening, the US decided to wait. It paused putting extra taxes on goods from these countries. So, for most countries, the new higher taxes are stopped for now. But the situation with China is different. The US did not pause the taxes for China. The reason is that China answered back with its own taxes. When the US added taxes on Chinese products, China added taxes on American products. This action is called retaliation. The US government said that because China retaliated, it must still face the higher taxes. These taxes could be very high, maybe up to 245%. The US had warned other countries. It told them not to retaliate like China did. It suggested that countries working on new deals would be treated differently. This big trade argument between the US and China affects more than just these two countries. Many people around the world are worried. The US and China have the world's two largest economies. When these big economies have trade problems, it can cause changes everywhere. Think about throwing a stone into water. The small waves, or ripples, spread far out. The trade fight works in a similar way. Some experts worry that the high taxes will make products more expensive for people in many countries. This is not just a problem for Americans or Chinese people, it's a global issue. Chinese people. There are also worries that the trade fight could slow down the whole world's economy. If the US economy, which is very large, faces problems like a recession, it often affects other countries too. Trade wars create uncertainty for businesses everywhere. Companies might become unsure about the future costs or rules. This could make them stop spending money on new projects or stop hiring new workers. Many believe that nobody really wins in a trade war. These kinds of fights can hurt businesses and ordinary people in many different places across the globe. What could happen next? The trade problems between the United States and China make people ask questions about the future. What could happen because of the new, higher taxes on goods? Things might change for many people and businesses in both countries, and maybe around the world too. One big question is about prices. When a country puts high taxes on goods from another country, those goods often become more expensive to buy. This means people in the US might have to pay more money for some things made in China. Everyday items could cost more in the shops. This could make it harder for families to buy what they need. Some experts worry that prices for many things could go up. When lots of prices rise, it can affect how much money people have left after paying for important things. These trade taxes could also change jobs. Some companies in the US might find it costs too much to buy parts or goods from China now. Maybe these companies will decide to make more things inside the US instead. This could create some new jobs in America, but it is not simple. Other US companies sell things to China, like food from farms. China has put its own taxes on these US goods. This makes it harder for those US companies to sell their products in China. This could mean some American workers lose their jobs. In China, companies that sell many goods to the US might also face problems. If they sell less, maybe some workers in China could lose their jobs too. It is hard to know for sure how jobs will change. Some people think that this kind of trade fight is not good for anyone. They believe that when big countries argue about trade with taxes, it can hurt businesses and people in both places. It can also create problems for other countries. Big economies like the US and China are very important for world trade. Problems between them can affect businesses everywhere. Many believe that finding ways to trade together peacefully is better for everyone. The future of the trade talks between the US and China is not clear. It, the situation changes often. Sometimes the countries talk, and sometimes they add more taxes. The US government wants China to change some of its trade ways. China says it is just protecting itself. Finding an answer that both sides agree on is very difficult. What happens next depends on the choices leaders in both countries make. Will they continue the trade fight, or will they find a new way to work together? Many people and businesses are waiting to see.